bleeding out on a trauma table inside Cook County General, a ruthless king of the Chicago underworld swore he'd rather die than let a nobody nurse save his life. But when his empire secretly turned against him, the woman he cruelly rejected became the only thing standing between him and the grave. The clock on the wall of Cook County General's Level 1 Trauma Center ticked past 3 a.m., a time when the city of Chicago usually surrendered its worst secrets. Nurse Amelia Croft was no stranger to the gruesome aftermath of the city's nocturnal turf wars. Having spent 3 years in conflict zones with international medical NGOs before returning to the States, the 28-year-old had seen enough shattered bodies to render her immune to panic. But nothing could have prepared the ER staff for the hurricane that blew through the double doors at 3:14 a.m. "Move! Everybody out of the damn way!" The roar belonged to a colossal man in a blood-soaked Armani suit, his face contorted in a mask of sheer panic and rage. This was Leo, the notorious right-hand enforcer for the Moretti crime family. Slung over his broad shoulder, leaving a visceral trail of crimson droplets across the pristine white linoleum, was Vincent Moretti himself. Vincent was a phantom in the press, but a god on the streets. At 32, he had ruthlessly consolidated the scattered factions of the Italian syndicate, ruling with an iron fist and a chillingly calm demeanor. Now, however, the boss looked terrifyingly mortal. A massive gunshot wound to his left shoulder had torn through muscle and nicked an artery, and his skin was a ghastly, translucent shade of grey. "Put him on Bay 4, now!" Amelia barked, her voice cutting through the rising hysteria of the emergency room. 2 junior nurses froze, terrified by the heavily armed men swarming the entrance, but Amelia didn't hesitate. She grabbed a pair of trauma shears and moved in. Leo slammed Vincent onto the gurney, grabbing the front of Amelia's scrubs with a massive, blood-stained hand. "If he dies, this whole hospital burns to the ground. Do you understand me?" "If you don't let go of me so I can stop the bleeding, he dies in 3 minutes," Amelia replied, her voice ice-cold. Her hazel eyes locked onto Leo's until, slowly, the giant released his grip and stepped back. Amelia went to work. The wound was a mess, a close-range hollow point that had caused massive tissue damage. But as she applied a tourniquet and packed the wound with hemostatic gauze, she noticed something that didn't align with simple hemorrhagic shock. Vincent was sweating profusely, his body trembling with micro-tremors, and his breathing was shallow and ragged, smelling faintly of garlic. "Push 2 units of O negative and get me a crash cart on standby," Amelia ordered, checking his vitals. His heart rate was dangerously erratic, spiking and crashing in a way that defied the blood loss. Suddenly, Vincent's eyes snapped open. They were a piercing, predatory green, clouded with pain but burning with instant hostility. Despite the agony, his survival instincts kicked in with violent force. He grabbed Amelia's wrist with his good hand, his grip like a steel vice, nearly crushing her bones. "Who the hell are you?" Vincent rasped, coughing up a small amount of phlegm. "I'm the nurse keeping you from bleeding out, Mr. Moretti. Keep still. You have arterial damage." Vincent looked around the sterile, chaotic room, his paranoia spiking. To a man who survived by trusting no one, a public hospital was a death trap, swarming with potential assassins, informants, and incompetent civilians. "Get your hands off me," he snarled, shoving her back with a sudden burst of adrenaline-fueled strength. Amelia stumbled, catching herself on the edge of the metal counter. "You're in critical condition. If you move, you'll tear through the artery completely," Amelia warned, stepping forward again, raising her hands placatingly. "I said back off," Vincent roared, the monitor beside him screaming as his heart rate skyrocketed. "Leo, where is Vogel? I told you never to bring me to this public slaughterhouse. Get Dr. Vogel here immediately." Leo stepped forward, looking torn. "Vogel is in the Hamptons, boss. You were losing too much blood. We had no choice." "I don't care," Vincent spat, his glare pinning Amelia to the spot. He looked at her with unvarnished disgust, taking in her standard-issue blue scrubs and the messy bun on top of her head. "I don't trust this place. I don't trust her. She's clumsy. She's a nobody. And she's probably on the O'Bannon payroll for all I know. Get this incompetent hack away from me before I have her hands broken." Amelia's jaw clenched. She had just saved this arrogant criminal's life, risking her own safety to stabilize him, and he was treating her like an assassin. "Mr. Moretti," Amelia said, keeping her voice dangerously level, "I don't care if you're the Pope or the devil himself. My only job is to stop you from dying. And right now, you are exhibiting signs of severe neurological distress that have nothing to do with that bullet hole." "Shut your mouth," Vincent hissed, struggling to sit up as fresh blood bloomed through the packing gauze. "Leo, get the car. We're leaving. Now." "Sir, you leave AMA against medical advice. You will bleed to death in the back of your SUV," the attending physician, Dr. Harrison, finally interjected, stepping timidly into the bay. "Then I'll die in my own car, not in a bed smelling of cheap antiseptic," Vincent replied coldly. With Leo's reluctant help, the Mafia boss forced himself off the gurney. He paused, swaying slightly, and locked eyes with Amelia one last time. "If I ever see your face again," Vincent whispered, his voice dripping with venom, "it will be the last thing you see." Amelia stood her ground, watching in silent disbelief as the entourage of mobsters escorted their bleeding, stubborn king out of the trauma bay. She looked down at her hands, coated in his blood, and then at the monitors that were still recording his erratic, bizarre vitals from the brief time he was hooked up. "Idiot," she muttered to herself, stripping off her gloves. But as she tossed them into the biohazard bin, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling in her gut. The tremors, the garlic scent on his breath, the severe, sudden nerve spasms. Vincent Moretti wasn't just dying from a gunshot wound. Something else was killing him from the inside out, and by refusing her help, he had just signed his own death warrant. 4 days had passed since the bloody encounter at Cook County General. The city's underground was humming with rumors. The Moretti family was keeping an unusually low profile, and whispers on the street suggested the boss had succumbed to his injuries. Amelia had tried to push the arrogant mobster out of her mind. She had double shifts to work, a grueling schedule that left her barely enough time to sleep, let alone worry about a man who had threatened her life. It was a rainy Tuesday night. Amelia had just finished a 14-hour shift and collapsed onto the worn velvet sofa in her cramped Logan Square apartment. She poured herself a cup of chamomile tea, listening to the rain lash against the window pane. Suddenly, the shadows in the corner of her living room shifted. Amelia gasped, dropping her mug. It shattered on the hardwood floor, hot tea pooling around her worn sneakers. Sitting in her armchair, completely submerged in the darkness, was a mountain of a man. "Don't scream, Miss Croft," a deep, gravelly voice rumbled. Leo leaned forward, the faint streetlight illuminating his rugged, exhausted face. He looked worse than he had at the hospital. His suit was wrinkled, and dark circles carved deep valleys under his eyes. "How did you get in here?" Amelia demanded, her heart hammering against her ribs as her eyes darted toward the kitchen knife block. "The locks on these doors are a joke," Leo said plainly, standing up. He held his hands out, showing they were empty. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to beg." Amelia blinked, stunned. The fearsome enforcer of the Moretti family was begging? "It's the boss," Leo continued, his voice tight with desperation. "He's dying. Dr. Vogel came back as did the surgery, patched the artery for But Vincent isn't recovering. He's worse. He can barely walk. He's hallucinating in blinding pain. Vogel says it's an infection, some rare post-operative complication. But it doesn't make sense. You said something in the ER. You said he was showing signs of distress that had nothing to do with the bullet. Amelia's professional instincts warred with her common sense. I told him he was sick. He threatened to have my hands broken. He's a paranoid bastard on his best days, Miss Croft, Leo admitted heavily. Right now, he doesn't know who to trust. But he didn't trust you. And you were the only one who didn't lie to him. I need you to come with me. Now. Name your price. 50,000, 100. I don't want your blood money, Amelia snapped. She looked at the giant man, seeing the genuine grief in his eyes. She remembered the bizarre symptoms. A medical puzzle always gnawed at her, and leaving a patient to die, even a monstrous one, violated the very core of her oath. Let me get my bag, she sighed, resigning herself to the madness. 30 minutes later, Amelia was escorted through the heavily fortified gates of a sprawling, Gothic-style estate in Winnetka. Security was suffocating. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter with attack dogs, and the tension in the air was thick enough to slice with a scalpel. Leo led her up a grand, sweeping staircase and down a dimly lit mahogany hallway, stopping before a set of double oak doors. He pushed them open. The master bedroom was vast and stiflingly hot. The curtains were drawn tightly shut, and the only sound was the harsh, rattling breath of the man in the center of the king-sized bed. Vincent Moretti was a shadow of the terrifying figure who had stormed into her ER. His skin was mottled, his dark hair plastered to his forehead with feverish sweat. His powerful frame seemed to have withered in just 4 days. As Amelia approached the bed, Vincent's heavy eyelids fluttered open. It took a moment for his fever-addled brain to process her presence. When he finally recognized her, his green eyes flared with a weak but potent fury. "You," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper, yet still carrying the weight of a command. "Leo, what is this bitch doing in my house? Get her out." "Shut up, Mr. Moretti. You don't have the breath to waste on insults," Amelia said, her tone brook no argument clinical. She dropped her medical bag on the bedside table and pulled out her penlight. "Leo, kill her," Vincent wheezed, trying to pull away from her, but his muscles violently spasmed, a cry of agony escaping his lips. "Hold him down," Amelia ordered Leo. The bodyguard hesitated, then gently but firmly pinned his boss's shoulders to the mattress. Vincent glared at Leo with a mixture of betrayal and helpless rage. Amelia ignored the mobster's death stares. She shined the light into his eyes, noting the sluggish pupillary response. She pulled back the heavy blankets, examining the surgical wound on his shoulder. Dr. Vogel's work was actually quite clean. The incision was healing nicely. There was no redness, no swelling, no sign of severe infection that would cause this level of systemic collapse. "His wound is fine," Amelia muttered, more to herself than to them. She picked up Vincent's hand, feeling the severe neuropathy, the nerve damage that was causing his agonizing cramps. Then she looked closely at his fingernails. There, running horizontally across the nail beds, were distinct, faint white lines. Mace's lines. Amelia's blood ran cold, the garlic scent on his breath in the ER, the sudden onset of neurological failure, the agonizing nerve pain. "Where is Dr. Vogel's medical chart?" Amelia demanded, turning to Leo. Leo hurried to a desk in the corner, returning with a leather-bound folder. Amelia flipped through the heavy pages, scanning the blood work Vogel had ordered. The CBC showed slight anemia, but what caught her eye was what wasn't there. There were no heavy metal toxicology screens. Vogel had been pumping Vincent full of high-dose, broad-spectrum antibiotics, which were completely useless and only taxing his failing liver further. "He's not dying from an infection," Amelia said, her voice echoing in the quiet room. She looked down at Vincent, who was watching her with wary, pain-filled eyes. "What is it then?" Leo asked, his fists clenched. "He's being poisoned," Amelia stated flatly. "Thallium, to be exact. It's odorless, tasteless, and highly toxic. It attacks the nervous system and mimics other diseases. It takes a few weeks to build up in the system, but the gunshot wound and the trauma of blood loss accelerated his body's collapse." Vincent stopped struggling. The words hung in the air, a heavy, suffocating truth. "Poisoned," Vincent whispered, his sharp mind fighting through the fog of fever. "Only 3 people handle my food and drink: my chef, Leo, and Donovan." Donovan was his underboss, the man who had been running the syndicate's operations while Vincent was incapacitated. Amelia pointed a finger at the medical chart. "Dr. Vogel is either the most incompetent physician on the eastern seaboard, or he's in on it. He completely ignored classic symptoms of heavy metal toxicity and gave you medication that masked the organ failure. If I hadn't come here tonight, you would have been dead by morning, and Vogel would have signed the death certificate citing post-surgical cardiac arrest." Silence fell over the room, heavy and absolute. The realization hit Vincent like a freight train. The empire he had built, the men he had trusted, were systematically assassinating him from within. The only person telling him the truth was the nurse he had relentlessly belittled and threatened to kill. Vincent's breathing slowed. He looked up at Amelia, the hostility in his green eyes slowly morphing into something else. Vulnerability, and a terrifying, cold calculation. "Can you cure it?" Vincent asked, his voice steadying, stripping away the arrogance to reveal the desperate survivor underneath. "I can start chelation therapy to bind the metals and flush them from your system," Amelia said, meeting his intense gaze without flinching. "But I need supplies from the hospital. Prussian blue. We have to move fast." Vincent weakly reached out, his trembling, cold fingers wrapping gently around Amelia's wrist. This time, there was no violence in his grip, only an anchor. "Leo," Vincent commanded, his eyes never leaving Amelia's. "Get her whatever she needs. Nobody else comes in this room. Nobody else touches me." He took a ragged breath. Only her. The sprawling, heavily fortified Vinetka estate was no longer a sanctuary. It had rapidly transformed into a gilded comb designed by traitors. Amelia Croft knew that keeping Vincent Moretti in that mahogany-paneled bedroom was a guaranteed death sentence. Donovan, the ambitious underboss, and Dr. Vogel, the compromised physician, would inevitably realize their meticulously planned lethal cocktail was being actively counteracted by her interventions. The window for escape was closing by the second. "We have to move him right now," Amelia ordered, securely tying off the fresh IV line of Prussian blue she had just administered. "If Donovan controls the house security, he controls who lives and dies tonight. We cannot wait for morning." Leo hoisted Vincent's massive, semi-conscious frame off the sweat-soaked mattress, grunting under the sheer weight of the mobster. "Where are we supposed to go?" "Every safe house, every penthouse, every warehouse in the syndicate's portfolio is compromised. Donovan has the keys to the kingdom." Vincent's head rolled against Leo's broad shoulder, his eyelids fluttering as he fought through the agonizing haze of the heavy metal poisoning. The old Hawthorne property. The abandoned hotel. Leo's eyes widened in genuine disbelief. "Boss, that place has been boarded up and condemned since the 70s. There's no power. No water, no security. It's a ruin. My grandfather's inheritance." Vincent forced the words through gritted teeth, his body violently resisting the toxic tremors racking his nervous system. There is a subterranean bunker beneath the foundations. Prohibition-era tunnels. It is a completely unlisted asset. Donovan doesn't know it exists. My grandfather hid his wealth and his people there during the Gangland Wars. Amelia didn't hesitate for a single second. The historical location was exactly the kind of ghost property they needed to disappear. Get him down the back stairwell and into the SUV. I am going to raid Vogel's medical supply room. I will meet you in the garage in 3 minutes. Do not let anyone see you. Within an hour, the blacked-out, heavily armored vehicle slipped unnoticed through the rusted, ivy-choked iron gates of the Hawthorne, a decaying, monolithic historical hotel sitting ominously on the gritty edge of the south side. Beneath the rotting floorboards of the grand lobby and the forgotten, dust-covered ballroom lay a heavily fortified, rusted steel door. Leo forced it open, revealing a cavernous, climate-controlled bunker the time had completely forgotten. It was a hidden asset passed down through the Moretti bloodline, untouched for decades, lined with brick and old electric wiring. "Find the breaker and turn those backup generators on," Amelia commanded, her authoritative voice echoing sharply off the damp concrete walls. She immediately began transforming a dusty, antique mahogany dining table in the center of the room into a makeshift surgical theater. Her movements were clinical and precise, stripping away the rotting silk linens and laying down sterile surgical drapes she had successfully smuggled from the estate's stash. "He's crashing, Amelia," Leo shouted, gently laying Vincent onto the hard wooden table. The mobster's breathing was perilously shallow, his pulse thready and erratic. The grueling physical stress of the clandestine transport had taxed his poisoned, weakened system far too heavily. Amelia shifted instantly into a high-gear, adrenaline-fueled focus, drawing directly on the grueling Walter Reed combat triage protocols she had relentlessly drilled into her muscle memory during her time in overseas conflict zones. In a chaotic, resource-starved environment like this bunker, a single moment of hesitation meant certain death. She bypassed the collapsed veins in his arms, expertly establishing a central line directly into his jugular vein to push the high-dose chelation fluids and necessary saline much faster into his heart. "Hold that tactical flashlight right there. Shine the beam directly on his chest," she instructed Leo, rapidly checking the gunshot wound on his shoulder. The extreme stress of moving had burst Dr. Vogel's internal sutures. Dark, arterial blood pooled dangerously beneath the jagged incision. "Vogel's sloppy, deliberate sabotage is failing. I have to open the shoulder back up and clamp the severed artery properly, or he bleeds out right here before the thallium poison even finishes its job." Using only local anesthetic and relying on Vincent's sheer, terrifying willpower to endure the pain, she sliced cleanly through the failing infected stitches. Vincent convulsed violently on the table, a guttural, agonizing groan ripping from his dry throat. "Hold him absolutely steady," she snapped, her eyes narrowed in absolute concentration. Her hands, steady as carved stone, navigated the slippery, ruined muscle tissue. For 3 agonizing, blood-soaked hours in the subterranean gloom of the historical bunker, Amelia fought a desperate, brutal war on 2 entirely different fronts, the heavy metal toxicity systematically destroying his internal organs, and the ruptured artery rapidly draining his remaining life force. As dawn broke silently above the abandoned hotel, casting weak light on the boarded-up windows, the portable heart monitor, hooked to a massive field battery, finally settled into a steady, rhythmic, reassuring beep. Amelia collapsed exhaustedly into a rusted metal folding chair, wiping a smear of Vincent's blood from her sweating forehead. Vincent was deathly pale, heavily battered, and resting precariously on a Prohibition-era gambling table, serving as an improvised ICU bed. But against all impossible odds, the king of the Chicago underworld was alive. For 2 incredibly tense, agonizing weeks, the heavily fortified underground bunker beneath the Hawthorne Hotel became their entire, isolated world. Above them on the city streets, the Chicago syndicate violently fractured and bled. Donovan, arrogantly assuming that Vincent had crawled away into the shadows to die a pathetic death, moved swiftly and brutally to seize the empty throne. But below the concrete and dirt, a profoundly different kind of seismic shift was occurring between the boss and the nurse. The intensive care regimen was physically exhausting. Amelia barely slept, monitoring Vincent's kidney function as the Prussian blue flushed the lethal thallium from his system. During these quiet hours, the ruthless boss and the dedicated nurse formed a profound bond. Vincent watched her with intense scrutiny. He noticed the dark circles under her hazel eyes, and how she skipped meals to ensure his IV medications were perfectly calibrated. He felt the fierce, protective determination she radiated. Vincent had spent his violent life surrounded by deceptive people who wanted to steal his power or end his life. No one had ever fought this relentlessly, simply to keep him breathing. One evening, as Amelia changed the bandages on his healing shoulder, Vincent reached up with his good hand. His calloused fingers, thankfully no longer trembling with neuropathy, gently caught her wrist. "Why are you still here, Amelia?" he asked, his voice a low, commanding rasp. "You stabilized my vitals days ago. You could have demanded your money and disappeared. You know what kind of monster I am, and the extreme danger you are in." Amelia looked at his grip. It wasn't the violent, crushing hold from the trauma center. It was warm, anchoring, and astonishingly tender. "You were my patient, Vincent," she replied softly, avoiding the intense, predatory gleam in his piercing green eyes. "I do not ever abandon my patients in the middle of a critical triage protocol. It goes against everything I believe in." "Do not lie to me," Vincent said softly, pulling her slightly closer to the edge of the mahogany table. "Not down here. In this bunker, cut off from the rest of the world, there are absolutely no lies between us." Amelia swallowed hard, feeling her pulse race under his thumb. "Because I saw a man who was viciously betrayed by every single person he trusted to protect him, and my conscience simply couldn't let them win. Maybe I saw that there is significantly more to you than the cold-blooded monster the press continually writes about." A slow, breathtaking, and entirely genuine smile touched Vincent's hardened lips, an incredibly rare expression that instantly transformed his ruthless, scarred face into something devastatingly handsome. "You are without a doubt the bravest, most infuriating woman I have ever met, Amelia Croft. And you are the only person in this God-forsaken, treacherous world that I truly trust." He pulled her down, capturing her lips in a desperate, consuming, and deeply possessive kiss. It was an unbreakable promise forged in spilled blood and agonizing survival. Amelia kissed him back, surrendering to the dangerous pull of the man she had dragged from the brink of death. But their secluded, romantic sanctuary couldn't possibly last forever. On the dawn of the 15th day, Leo burst violently through the heavy steel blast doors, his rugged face tight and grim. "Donovan finally found us. He managed to track the missing medical supply batch numbers from the estate's inventory. His elite hitmen are actively surrounding the hotel perimeter above us right now." Vincent immediately sat up. The sickly, dying, vulnerable man was entirely gone. In his place sat the resurrected, merciless king of the Chicago underworld, his bright green eyes burning with cold, lethal intent. He rolled his broad, muscular shoulders, testing the newly healed tissue. The faint ache was still there, but it was purely fuel for his rage. "Let them come down here," Vincent snarled softly, reaching decisively for the heavy tactical pistol Leo offered him. He turned to face Amelia, his ruthless expression softening for just a fraction of a second. "Stay hidden safely behind the secondary blast doors. Do not step out into the corridor until I personally come to get you." "Vincent, your heart rate isn't stable. You are not fully recovered," Amelia warned, her heart hammering painfully against her ribs. "I am recovered enough to reclaim my city and slaughter the men who threatened you," he replied, sliding a fresh, heavy magazine into the weapon with a sharp, metallic click. Donovan stupidly thought he successfully buried me. "Today, I am going to show him exactly what happens when you fail to finish the job." The echoing sound of heavy combat boots descending the stone stairwell signaled the imminent arrival of Donovan's assassins. Vincent moved with terrifying, lethal grace into the deep shadows of the underground tunnel, fading completely into the darkness of his inherited historical fortress. Deafening gunfire erupted, shaking decades of dust from the concrete ceiling. Amelia pressed her hands over her ears, desperately praying for his survival. She heard the agonizing screams of men falling, tactical shouts turning to panic, and the methodical advancement of Vincent executing his wrath upon the traitors. Silence finally fell over the bunker, heavier and more suffocating than the thick gun smoke choking the stagnant air. The secondary steel door groaned open. Vincent stood imposing in the frame, his dark suit dusted with white plaster, a fresh smear of an enemy's blood stark against his sharp jawline. He casually dropped the empty smoking pistol to the concrete floor. He walked toward Amelia, wrapping his blood-stained arms securely around her and burying his face in her neck, breathing in the scent of sterile alcohol and her warm skin. "It is completely over," he murmured darkly against her racing pulse. "The syndicate is rightfully mine again. Donovan is dead in the hallway. Dr. Vogel is next on the list." He pulled back slightly, gently framing her face with his large, rough hands, looking down at her with a fierce devotion that bordered on religious worship. "You gave me my life and my empire back, Amelia. Now absolutely everything I have, everything I rule, and everything I am belongs entirely to you. You will never have to run, and you will never ever be afraid again. You are mine." Amelia looked up at the ruthless Mafia boss who had once brutally rejected her help. She wasn't just his civilian nurse anymore. She was the undisputed queen of the Underworld. If you were captivated by this dangerous tale of loyalty, betrayal, and dark romance, you won't want to miss the intense stories we have coming up next. Did you love how Amelia and Vincent survived against all odds? Drop a comment below with your favorite part, smash that like button, and share this gripping drama with your friends. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the notification bell so you never miss another thrilling upload. See you soon.